Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we are speaking with Yennie Rautenberg-Loya. Yennie is the founder of Rautenberg Coaching, a Latina-owned leadership development firm committed to cultivating the next generation of authentic leaders, prioritizing humanity, authenticity, collaboration, and inclusion over the unsustainable grind culture.
Mm.
Yennie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I have been looking forward since January to this opportunity. So thank you.
I
Mhm.
am so happy to have you with us. Now, folks, we will be speaking about the three-layer authentic leadership model, aligning impact, empowering others, and leading yourself. But before we get into that conversation, Yennie, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, I am originally from Mexico City, and I have been in the U.S. since 2000. So it's almost half of my life I have been here, and the other half in Mexico City. So I am in San Diego, in California, and I have several years of experience in coaching and training, pretty much since 2002, approximately, when I started doing this more as a hobby. And in parallel, I work in corporate communications and public relations for 20 something years, both in Mexico and here in the US. I worked for several Fortune 500, for and with Fortune 500 companies. And in 2018, I was laid off. And I took that as an opportunity to just pursue what I really care for, what I am passionate about, which is working with people, supporting people, empowering people to find their greatest experience expression of themselves.
Now, I love how, sometimes one of our worst times in our lives, which is a layoff, could become
Hmm.
a catalyst to just a beautiful journey forward, right? And for those of
Absolutely.
you that are experiencing that or have experienced that, my heart goes out to you at the moment. But be
Hmm.
sure that this is an opportunity for you as well. And we're going to be talking about the three-layer authentic leadership model that you have created, that you speak about, and you're all around. And folks, if you're interested in learning more about that three-layer authentic leadership model, we will have a link as part of the show notes for your convenience, and you can go there and dive in a little more. But as we're talking about that model, Yennie, in the extra personal layer, how
Hmm.
can leaders ensure that their unique expression and impact align with their actions to create meaningful change in their organization and community?
Yeah, that's a great question because we want to make sure that leaders have a clear understanding and grasp of what is their unique expression, what do they care for, what matters to them, really, right? And then doing that internal, and that is kind of the first layer of the model, doing that intrapersonal work, working on figuring out who's your authentic self, what do you care for, what matters to you. And then from there, you develop that internal work and you're clear and well grounded in who you are, what matters to you. And from there, you can have just your natural and authentic and genuine expression so you can have a positive impact in your organizations, in your community, and in the world. And why this is important, and this is an approach that I think hasn't been leveraged as much in leadership development, and is doing that internal work, building from within to lead beyond, right? So the work that we do is going into that first layer, building the foundation for people to understand and have a really clear clarity about all of those things that are authentic to them based on their own experiences, on their own interest, values, purpose, and then how are they going to make sure that their actions and their leadership is aligned with that. And this is something interesting that I would like to share with you, Enrique, because what I have seen is that a lot of leaders end up in a leadership position and they haven't done because they don't know or they don't want to do that internal work. And without doing that internal work, there's always that sense of like, is this the right thing for me? What am I standing for, etc. And what we traditionally do as human beings is we want to have things, right? Like have the next title, have X amount of money in the bank, have a house, etc. Because we think that that is going to feel inside, right? That is going to fulfill us as human being. And my approach is different. My approach is let's work first inside. Let's work first on finding your own fulfillment, your own worth and value as an individual. And that is the foundation to lead. So you are leading to impact others and not necessarily as a self-fulfillment. That it's more like a collateral benefit of it, but the focus is on how can you contribute to others.
Absolutely. The inner work is where all of the great
Mm,
details are actually faced. You know, you face those details because out of you comes everything. So I love
absolutely.
that you start there, and most people should start there. And if you haven't, this is the time. Now, you spoke about leading others. So, regarding leading with others, what are the key elements of fostering collaboration and empowerment while balancing advocacy and authority?
Yeah, and I was very specific. This is what the second layer is called, leading with others. And I was very emphatic and very intentional in talking about that from a perspective of we lead with other people. In organizations, there are leaders everywhere. You don't have to have a title, you don't have to have a position. Really, there's an opportunity for everyone to lead. And when this happens, this collaborative leadership style becomes essential. So with that, we want to make sure that leaders are building safe environments, that there is a space for open communication, for holding and having a coexistence of different perspectives, and that everybody has an opportunity to contribute and to participate. Advocacy and authority are two things that are very interesting to me because they come up all the time in my coaching sessions. And there are two different things. One about advocacy is both advocating for others, but also advocating for ourselves. And there's a lot of work that we can do to improve that overall. As leaders, a lot of times, they have the best intentions, but when the stress comes in, when they are pressured with, performing and putting out deliverables, etc., that kind of goes out of the window and it's all about performing and doing everything. So that aspect of humanity, which is what I advocate for, is almost missed. So how can leaders and managers make sure that they're advocating for their teams and making sure that everybody has equal opportunities, but also as individuals, how are we advocating for ourselves? And you probably have seen this as minority groups. This idea or concept of advocate for oneself is something that it's not culturally ingrained in us. So working on that part is important as well. The other thing about the authority that I have found very interesting is that we have maybe like a cloudy understanding or concept of authority, and leaders, they want to enable an environment that works for everyone, that it's inclusive, collaborative, but at the same time, they need to set boundaries. They need to set expectations. They need to hold people accountable, right? So, how to balance those things? A leader or a team manager is not a friend, but it doesn't have to be a dictator either, right? So, how to balance that? And we go back to that internal work. When leaders are clear about who they are, what they care for, etc., they can build their own style of authority and they can implement it with their teams. So those are kind of the different things that play a role in this second layer of leading with others.
Definitely. And balancing is one of the things that
Mm.
leaders have to learn how to do. It's a careful dance, right? A careful dance on not stepping on people's toes, but also reminding them that, hey, you got this to do, you got that to do, but also cultivating an environment of growth. And
Hmm.
talking about balancing intrapersonally, how can leaders practice self actualization and maintain authenticity while balancing the demands of agency and autonomy?
Yeah, well, the part of that inner work and that building within is important, um, and people again need to understand what is their or what is the potential they have, what are their skills, what are their abilities, and how to build that and how to be able to execute that, right? So first, we want to understand who we are, and that is the part of authenticity. So once you figure out who you are, what you want to stand or where you want to stand for yourself, then I think that agency and autonomy become very um, easy. And because that authenticity is kind of your foundation and is what is going to be also your compass in terms of what kind of decisions you make that are true to yourself, that what kind of actions and you have that can represent who you really are. And it becomes a little bit challenging sometimes because when we are in organizations or when we're part of a industry or a business, well, there are other demands that come from outside, right? So at what expense are we willing to um, produce and still be true to yourself? And that is, again, it all comes down to balance. But first, we need to understand, what do I care for? What are my values? What is why am I here as a leader? And from there, you can start to define what actions and what decisions you make that are true to yourself, at the risk that maybe it might not go the way that you want, right?
Definitely. And, talking about how you communicate as a leader and how you navigate all these different types of events in our leadership, in the interpersonal layer, what communication strategies can leaders use to effectively advocate? And we spoke about advocation
Mhm.
earlier, to advocate for their teams while ensuring collaboration remains a core part of their leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important, and this is part of my philosophy, focusing on the human being, right? Like bringing humanity to organizations, to corporations. And I think that as a leader, leaders need to understand that they are people, they are human beings, and they're working with human beings. So being clear about that and working with individuals and teams in a way that makes a space for everyone to be themselves, to express and to bring their strengths and their talents to the team. So it's important for first for a leader to understand what who are the people he's or she is working with, and then what are the things that are going to motivate them, to drive them to perform, to execute, to participate, to bring their talent. So there needs to be a human connection. Now, I'm not saying that they need to be best friends, but at least there needs to be an understanding of what are the motives of people, what are the things that inspire people, so they can constantly bring that collaboration and bring that you know uh, performance to the foreground. But open communication, being inclusive in your communication is super important. And one thing that I've seen that a lot of times gets in the way of this is tolerating toxic behaviors. It is very interesting because a lot of times people who are not who are high performers, I'm not generalizing by any means, right? But a lot of times we have seen that people who are toxic in the work environment, they tend to be people who are really good performers. So as a leader, I think that you need to balance that and understand where is the limit and what are you going to tolerate? I have been doing work with hockey teams, and that has been a question. What do you do with a team member who is a great player, but maybe they are not aligning to the ethics or the corporate, or not the corporate, but the expectations that you have as a team? And a lot of times coaches have to go through that tough decision of putting that player outside of the game at the risk of not winning, but in order to make a clear statement of what are the behaviors that are expected within the team. So I think that leaders, and that is a tough one because most of us, we don't want confrontation. So how do you balance that performing and attitude in a way that makes sense for the team and don't break that collaboration overall of your entire group?
Yeah, that's a very powerful point. And I just saw a video from Deion Sanders, right? He's a coach, right? He's coaching football. And he came in the room and said, for those of you who are flunking, you might as well forget about football because
Mm,
I'm going to take you out
mm,
of the team. You're going to go
mhm,
focus on that school because I care more about you than this game.
mm,
And they're just a
mhm.
powerful leadership moment. Now, this is collegiate football. We're not talking about the workforce, but just as an example of a leader that knows what the priority is and
Mhm.
is able to communicate that for the sake of the not only the player or in this case a team member,
Yeah.
but the organization.
You pointed to something that is really important. It doesn't mean like, oh, because you're toxic, you're going to be out, right? But it's as a leader, identifying those behaviors and working hand in hand with the person. Again, we're talking about human beings. So finding ways to support that person to navigate and to figure out what's going on with them. And yes, say their behaviors that are not acceptable and have very clear agreements and expectations. But I just wanted to make sure that it didn't come across like, oh, if you're toxic, you're out. It's more like, okay, you're toxic, what's going on, let's figure out how to work together. So that, I just wanted to make that clarification.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about that type of care, it reminds me of self-care, right? Because
Mm.
self-care in leadership is so vital and it's so needed that sometimes when we don't care for ourselves, we become toxic, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about self-care and leadership. They are often seen as separate pursuits. So, how can leaders integrate self care practices to enhance their intrapersonal development and sustain long term leadership success?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that this is changing, and that's why I do what I do, because I have a vision that this can change. But we can see nowadays that there is more, and especially because of the pandemic, this idea of self-care, of mindfulness, etc., has become more common in the workplace. But something is to say it, and the other is to actually put it in practice. I have some trainings with executives, with leaders, uh, doing that first layer, right, of leading yourself. And when things get too personal, people freak out. It's like, oh, I didn't think that we were going to talk about emotions, right? Or like, what does my upbringing have to do with the way that I treat my team, or things like that? That um, we are not. It's not a norm. It's not yet normalized in a work environment, in a leadership development. But hey, humans are human. I mean, leaders are human beings, right? So it is important to do that work because, as you say, if you're not doing that internal work, if you're not taking care of yourself, just out of tiredness, you might have, you know, reactions or interactions with people that are not um, your best, you're not being at your best. And sometimes it's necessary to step back, to look at what's going on with me, what I'm having this outbursts, what I'm having this kind of reactions to people, and do that internal work, do that development, reflection, understanding where you come from, what are your emotions. I mean, Sometimes we cannot even articulate what is the emotion that we are feeling. So there's a lot of work to do in that area to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves as human beings first, so we are able to lead. So again, it goes back to building within to lead beyond. And it is important for people to do that, because guess what? If you don't do it, your body is going to claim it and you're going to end up sick or with some injuries because your body is saying, "Hey, time out. I need some rest. I need to take care of myself." So exercising, eating well, making sure that you're sleeping well, and taking care of yourself is important. But it's not only that, it's also making sure that you're fulfilled and happy as a human being, right? Some of the work that we do in that intrapersonal work in the first layer of leading yourself is doing a reflection about what is happiness and what is success for you, because we have a lot of ideals, a lot of pictures of what happiness and success is, but what it really is for you is important for you to define, because you might realize, like, you know what, this thing that is causing me so much stress and so much pain and so much uh, of my wellness is not even what I want in my life. That is not happiness is for me. So that reflection work is super important, and making sure that you're taking care of yourself as well.
Yes, very important, folks, to be aware of what you want out of life so that
Mhm.
you can go after that and not waste time in other avenues. Now, Jenny, it's wonderful to have you explain these sections of your model. And like I mentioned before, folks, the model will be a reference. I will make sure you have the website link to go to that and get into it a little further. But Jenny, I wanted to ask, what do you have coming up, and how can the viewer or listener get a hold of you if they want to ask more about the model?
Yeah, well, what I'm looking forward to is next year I have big plans for putting actually this model into practice. I have been doing the or into like reality, right? Like I have been doing this work, and since I started doing, well, I would say since I started my career, has been kind of simmering this idea of the model. And I am finally in a place right now where I am like, okay, this is what I'm standing for, and this is what I want to do. So I revamped my approach, my website, etc. So it's very fresh right now on rautenbergcoach.com. It's my website. And they can also find me in LinkedIn as coach dash Yennie, Yennie. And I would be super excited to engage with your audience and to answer any questions they may have.
Outstanding. Well, folks, we'll have all the information as part of the video and show notes for you to be able to get a hold of Jenny and all the work she is doing. We are co authors in the Latino Leadership
Mhm.
Playbook. So I'll make sure to put a link to that as well for you to be able to get that book and peruse through that. Jenny, thank you so much for being with me and sharing your model and sharing your expertise over this particular subject. Now, folks, I want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, the Outlier Project, and Duco. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or you have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast, let us know by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. This podcast is brought to you by StreamYard, a browser based tool that lets you live stream to any platform and record podcasts in studio quality. And we're using it to record this show. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.